Well, you know, I believe very strongly that the first duty of any government is to protect its citizens. It's the oldest principle. It goes back to the beginnings of government. However, it's abundantly clear to me and to probably most of you watching at home that our government and successive governments have forgotten this, and they constantly fail to protect innocent citizens. Now, Katie Amess, the daughter of Sir David Amess, who was brutally murdered by an IS-inspired terrorist, in my opinion, has had this to say. I've got a little clip here for you.
In the meeting, she was going all around the houses, and I said, no, I don't need to hear any of this. Yes or no, are you going to give me an inquiry? When I pushed her and her back was against the wall, she tried to use that as an excuse. And I said, what are you talking about? That is not a legitimate argument. And then she tried to backpedal a little bit, but there was no other answer she could give me as to why I wouldn't be allowed an inquiry when Southport, rightly so, had an inquiry launched immediately. What is it in my father's case that they do not want to see the light of day? And what about all the other poor people that Prevent failed, who don't have the platform that I do? I presume that they will now be launching inquiries into the failings in their cases as well.
Yeah, it's failure after failure, isn't it? And it's a big question that I don't think we've asked before. Why did David Amess not have a public inquiry as to the security failings that led to a Member of Parliament, a democratically elected Member of Parliament's death by the hands of an extremist? Well, clearly, the programme designed to stop these radicals in our country has completely failed. It's botched. That's the Prevent programme. Time after time, it's failed people. Even, of course, in the case of Southport, it rejected and failed to act on that murderer there as well. The reality is, and it's seemingly clear to me, that you cannot de-radicalise these people. We need to be building prisons, maximum security prisons, and putting them in there. Or, in the cases where they are foreigners, deported immediately. And at the moment, we have multiple, and Patrick did a great job on this Thursday, by the way, we've got multiple hate preachers trying to get into our country, spreading more extremism. What are we doing about that? Not enough. These programmes are a flawed operation that the government has lost control of security in our state. And I say we either need to support or start locking people up and get rid of these ridiculous, ineffective programmes.
All right, hold your thoughts, Emma. I'm really keen to know what you think. But we have got this clip to play of a government minister, Dan Jarvis, commenting on this very case.
The reviewer found that from the material reviewed, the assessment in terms of the perpetrator's vulnerabilities was problematic, and this ultimately led to questionable decision-making and sub-optimal handling of the case during the time he was engaged with Prevent and Channel. The reviewer ultimately found that while Prevent policy and guidance at the time was mostly followed, the case was exited from Prevent too quickly.
Can I just say, Katie Amess has been very clear about this. That review they did was worth the paper that I'm holding here. Right? There was no investigation. It's a paper review. It's as good as an exercise done by a single civil servant. That's her words.
Emma, you've been soaked in extremism for years. By that, I don't mean you're an extremist. I mean that you've been following and chronicling all of these things. How long has the Prevent programme been ineffectual?
It's difficult to say, because with something that's preventative, you don't really know if it's succeeding. Then the cases don't.
Do you accept it's necessary?
I mean, yes, we need something. Absolutely, we do. But you just heard there the language that he was using. Vulnerabilities, problematic, suboptimal.
Yeah.
It's just this way of going about things that is so sort of inclined towards obfuscation. It's just designed to make things, you know, not cut to the chase, cut to the point. And I think, you know, Katie Amess is absolutely right. She is a complete legend for fighting this as she is. And she's been repeatedly fobbed off time and time again over it. But I think ultimately the problem is not... yes, we do have to talk about the Prevent programme. We have to address any issues with the Prevent programme. But this is a much broader issue. To begin with, we need to not have uncontrolled borders that are porous and allow extremists in the first place.
Well, I think this is pretty simple. You can't solve a problem if you're not willing to acknowledge the causes of the problem, and we're all terrified to talk about radical Islam.
Yes, that's true.
We're talking about knives and the points on knives. We're talking about social media. We're talking about all this silly, diversionary stuff. The problem is radical Islam, and no one has the guts to talk about it.
That is exactly what William Shawcross said in his review of Prevent, that they always seem to feel that they have to balance it by talking about the far right as well. They can't just talk about radical Islam despite the fact that it's the biggest threat.
Well, speaking of balance, I have a duty under the regulator Ofcom to bring in this person here.
Look, obviously, this crime was despicable, and none of us disagree on that. Now, is Prevent working? Clearly not. But let's reform it rather than throw away the liberties that we allow refugees and asylum seekers in this country to access. Now, it's not a zero-sum game. We can protect British citizens as well as be an open country.
Clearly not.
An open country that accepts people from far and wide who have had really challenging circumstances back home.
Kai.
And who can seek a better life here in the UK.
This country has become a weak, soft, easily abused state. We're hiding behind corporate language and politicians like that standing up in Parliament telling us we can reform it, we can reform it. We've got to hide behind all these sensitivities. End it now.
All right.
Build the prisons, put them in there.